This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the program. Our top stories: Israel continues its ground offensive in Gaza, claiming more Hamas fighters have been killed in a night of bombardments. The number of children killed in Gaza has passed the annual death toll in all conflict zones since the year 2019. The Kremlin blames external interference after anti-Israel protesters storm an airport in Dagestan shortly after a plane from Tel Aviv landed. And China stresses improving military ties with the United States, but warns it will not compromise when it comes to Taiwan. Israel continues to extend its ground offensive in Gaza. It says it's hit more than 600 Hamas targets and killed dozens of the militant group's fighters. Israeli airstrikes have been reported close to two of northern Gaza's largest hospitals, and there have been attacks on refugee camps in the West Bank. Footage has been posted online that appears to show Israeli tanks on the outskirts of Gaza City, cutting off a key route linking the north and south of the Strip. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Sarah, tell us more about what Israel has said on its operation in Gaza.
Hello there, Jamie. Well, look, the military is remaining fairly tight-lipped about this extended military incursion into the Gaza Strip, and its wording has been somewhat vague. What the IDF spokesperson came out to say a few hours ago was that it is expanding, intensifying and will continue into the Gaza Strip. Now, overnight, the IDF said it took out around 600 of what it is calling Hamas posts, saying it hit underground infrastructure and other Hamas areas, saying that dozens and dozens of Hamas fighters, including 4 senior commanders, were killed, although this has not been verified. Now, look, Jamie, this ground operation is causing real concern here in Israel, given the number of hostages that are being held in the Gaza Strip. We did have confirmation just a short while ago from the Israeli President Herzog. He said that Shani Luk, she is the German-Israeli dual citizen, that we saw that horrific video of her being in the back of a pickup truck being taken into Gaza. It has now been confirmed that she has, in fact, died. We also know that Hamas has just posted a video online on its Telegram channel, which is being widely circulated, of 3 Israeli women pleading with the Netanyahu government for a prisoner swap deal to be done ASAP so these people can get out. And let me tell you, these numbers just keep going up.
So far, we have notified the families of 312 fallen IDF soldiers and the families of 239 hostages. Returning the hostages is a supreme national mission. Our ground activity in the Gaza Strip serves, among other things, this purpose. The issue of the hostages is not only a national issue, it's a global issue. Children, women and the elderly, Israelis and other nationalities are being held by a murderous organization that committed a war crime.
Sarah, more of Israel's backers overseas are calling for humanitarian supplies to get through to Gaza.
Yeah, you're certainly right. Look, it's a very dire situation in the Gaza Strip. We do know that the Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister Sunak, has just got off a number of calls. He had a flurry of diplomatic phone calls earlier this morning, the latest with the Dutch Prime Minister Rutte there. He's also spoken with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and also with Qatar's Emir, calling for more humanitarian aid. And also we need to remember to get these British nationals out of Gaza through the Rafah crossing. They've been stuck there now for around a month. Now, Sunak tweeted after this call with MBS saying that we both recognise the devastating consequences of wider conflict in the Middle East. And look, this is certainly very concerning given these protests that have been happening not just overnight, these pro-Palestinian protests, but over the last few weeks, with a Cobra meeting happening right now with fears that the United Kingdom may have to be put on a higher terror alert. So look, it really seems to be spilling over. And as you mentioned, just so much concern right now for the situation in the Gaza Strip.
Sarah, thank you for that. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Well, more than 8,000 Palestinians have now been killed as Israeli airstrikes continue to pound the Gaza Strip. Palestinian health officials say strikes have hit close to hospitals in Gaza City. The United Nations says nearly 120,000 civilians are sheltering alongside thousands of patients and doctors in hospitals in the north. Let's talk now to our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. Noor, bring us up to date. What's the latest where you are?
Well, right now I am standing inside the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, which is located in Deir al-Balah. And this is one of the main cities in middle Gaza. Basically, Gaza, it is like three parts, northern Gaza, middle Gaza, and southern Gaza. Since the beginning of this war conflict, the Israeli army asked the people, the civilians, to move from northern Gaza to middle and southern Gaza for their safety. Now and lately, and just today, the Israeli warplanes basically thrown some leaflets asking people, and they also published this on social media, asking people to move from even middle Gaza to southern Gaza. So the people are now confused. Here where I'm standing, also over the past few hours, many injuries and many people were killed arrived to the hospital. What is happening now is that not only the Israeli warplanes attacking cars that are moving on the Salah ad-Din road, which links northern Gaza to southern Gaza, where a number of people were reported killed, but also the Israeli Navy is shelling towards Palestinian cars that are moving in the in the western road that is close to the shores with Gaza. So the people are actually confused. They don't know what to do, which route to take, if they want to move from northern Gaza to southern Gaza. And also the Israeli incursion in eastern Al-Barij shows that Israel has a plan to separate basically northern Gaza from southern Gaza.
Noor, what about these claims that shelling has come close to 2 hospitals in northern Gaza?
Well, yes, there has been shelling on around the Al-Shifa Hospital, which is located in central Gaza City. Also airstrikes around the Al-Quds Hospital, which is located in Tel El-Hawa neighborhood, and this neighborhood is partly erased, if we can say. The director of the hospital said yesterday in a televised statement that the Israeli army called them and gave them the last warning before they attack the hospital, and this is according to the director of the Al-Quds Hospital. But the thing here is that there is thousands of families that are taking shelter inside the Al-Quds Hospital. There is hundreds of patients, people with operations, a woman that gave birth. They are patients at this hospital. They are residents at this hospital. So they refused to evacuate. The director, the doctors, the nurses, everyone who is staying inside the Al-Quds Hospital. And the same thing is happening regarding the Al-Shifa Hospital. And these hospitals are the 2 main hospitals basically in Gaza, and the 2 that are still operating, while we're looking more at more than 12 hospitals in Gaza that stopped working. So yes, the people inside those 2 hospitals, Al-Shifa Hospital and Al-Quds Hospital, refused to evacuate.
Noor, thank you for that. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza, and apologies for the breakup there on the signal. Well, China says it's willing to help the United Nations to increase assistance to Palestine and improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The Chinese envoy, Jia Jun, called for an immediate ceasefire to protect civilians during a meeting with Philippe Lazzarini, the head of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees. The number of children killed in Gaza in the last 3 weeks is now greater than the total number killed in conflicts across the world in any year since 2019. According to Save the Children, at least 3,195 children have been killed in Gaza since the 7th of October. Those children make up more than 40% of all the people reported killed in Gaza. And with more children believed missing and this conflict intensifying, the death toll is likely to be much higher. The United Nations says 2,985 children were killed in conflicts in 24 countries in 2022. Let's talk now to James Denslow, the head of humanitarian and conflict at Save the Children UK. James, welcome. Let me ask you first, what steps are necessary to ensure the protection and safety of children caught up in this crossfire, particularly those seeking refuge in schools and hospitals?
Well, it's a desperate situation for children in Gaza, as your statistics just demonstrated. 50% of the population in Gaza are children, if we ever forget that. And of course, the key issue is the amount of violence that's happening around their homes, their schools, their hospitals, their playgrounds. There's no safe place in Gaza. What is desperately needed is some form of humanitarian ceasefire or de-escalation or mechanism in which children can be better protected from weapons meant for modern battlefields, not to be used in proximity to the most vulnerable amongst us. Children have a physiology that is different to adults. They have less blood, thinner skin, more brittle bones, and that is the reason that they are disproportionately affected by explosive weapons with wide area effects. And of course, the big concern is that this number will simply continue to rise.
How can the international community and humanitarian organisations like yours work together to address what you're describing, particularly the children?
Well, I think the notion of sort of deconfliction within urban conflict is quite a well-known phenomenon, making clear that there are areas that will be out of the limits, off limits. There will not be any targeting or any proximity targeting. And that's one of the crucial difficulties for any military actor operating in Gaza, is that it's such a densely populated area that if you drop a 500-pound bomb on a military target, you may have reverberating effects that have huge consequences for a civilian population. So to be proportional in a response there is incredibly difficult. And I think the number of children who have been killed and critically injured, and of course, a lot of the children who have been injured will require specialist medical care not available currently in Gaza, where stocks of medicine are running desperately low. If you've lost a limb, you'll need significant care, you'll need prosthetics, you'll need lots of recovery support, and that isn't available in Gaza right now. So it's a combination of the perfect storm of aid not being allowed to get in, injured children not being allowed to get out, and levels of violence continuing to increase.
We were talking just now about the plight of hospitals with our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. I mean, I wonder what specific measures can be implemented to try and ensure the safety of both patients and medical staff in hospitals.
Well, everyone knows where hospitals are in conflict zones, or they should do. All armed actors should know the coordinates, the location of hospitals, and be very clear that these are off limits. These are not a target. And of course, no armed actors should be in proximity to hospitals or using them as cover. And of course, that is what gives hospitals their protected status, that we're seeing so many people rush to, not just for the treatment for severely injured children, but also people who have their homes have been destroyed and they have no safe place to go. So hospitals are sort of the most obvious and dramatic places that we need to protect. And the fact that there has been damage to hospitals have been closed. There is concern that hospitals are being asked to evacuate when you have children in incubators or having just had severe surgery or having serious surgery. This is impossible. So the future of hospitals in Gaza is a litmus test for the conduct of hostilities in this conflict.
James, thanks for that, and thanks for joining us. James Denslow from Save the Children UK. The Kremlin says the storming of an airport in the Russian region of Dagestan by anti-Israel demonstrators was the result of outside influence. The Interior Ministry says 60 people have been arrested after hundreds of protesters in the predominantly Muslim region in the North Caucasus raided Makashhala airport on Sunday, shortly after a plane from Tel Aviv landed. 20 people were injured. Israel has called on Russia to protect all of its citizens. Well, our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova is in Moscow. Dasha, what do you know?
Well, indeed, the Russian authorities do blame the outside interference and the outside influence on the events that unfolded in the Republic of Dagestan in Makhachkala, when the mob of angry people have staged an anti-Israeli riot and stormed the Makhachkala airport. We understand that the local authorities there have acted swiftly to arrest anyone who has been involved into this rally that is anti-Israeli in its nature. But the anti-Israeli sentiment in Russia by the Russian authorities have indeed been blamed on the outside forces, with the Russian Foreign Ministry stressing very clearly that that was a result of the events and the plans orchestrated from outside Russia, with Ukraine playing the key and direct role in that. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova has stressed that one of the people who has been involved to the Telegram channels that have been calling for those riots in the predominantly Muslim Dagestan Republic was Ilya Ponomaryov, deemed as a foreign agent in Russia, and who has left the Russian Federation for Ukraine, where he is staged and based at the moment. So the Russian authorities are saying that that is an attempt to split the Russian society from inside, from within the country, particularly against the backdrop as the international attention is waning from the conflict in Ukraine. But at the same time, we do see this as yet another explicit example of the anti-Israeli sentiment within the Russian Federation. We have seen before that there was an incident in Khazayurt, which is also in Dagestan, where the mob has gathered outside at a hotel where presumably the Jewish people have been staying. But the Russian authorities do stress that, very importantly, this is unacceptable. Russia is a multinational and multi-confessional country where these acts are unacceptable.
And President Putin is due to hold a security meeting about this.
That's right. We're expecting the Russian president to hold a security meeting that will include the security chiefs, as well as the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin, and the former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. They are expected to talk about the unity of the Russian people against those events which are deemed as unacceptable in Russia. But obviously, we are seeing that Moscow is trying to keep the balanced approach, saying that the hostilities in the Middle East have to end. But at the same time, Moscow is doing its best to mediate what it can. For instance, Moscow received the representative of the Hamas movement in the Russian capital last week for the consultation. So certainly this is yet another incident that is being used, according to Moscow, to split the Russian society, and Moscow will not allow that to happen.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, China pledges to renew military ties with the United States as security leaders from around the world gather in Beijing.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos and unicorn companies. Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Israel continues its ground offensive in Gaza, claiming more Hamas fighters have been killed in a night of bombardment. The number of children killed in Gaza has now passed the annual death toll in all conflict zones since the year 2019. And the Kremlin blames external interference after anti-Israel protesters storm an airport in Dagestan shortly after a plane from Tel Aviv landed. China has committed to re-establish military ties with the United States during talks at a security forum in Beijing. The comments were made by the country's most senior defense official, the vice chairman of China's Central Military Commission. He also stressed China's security cooperation with other countries.
We hope to make friends with the armies of all nations by trust. We will deepen strategic cooperation and coordination with Russia, and on the basis of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence and win-win cooperation, develop military ties with the United States.
Well, Rory Daniels is Managing Director of the Asia Society Policy Institute. She's also Senior Fellow at the Center for China Analysis.
From the U.S. perspective, I think the officials here in Washington would like to see this so that when problems and crises occur, they know exactly who to talk to on the Chinese side to manage escalation and hopefully to resolve those crises quickly and carefully. So I think this is a really important ask. What it looks like in practice is that the two sides will get together periodically and exchange their views on strategic issues broadly, but also on emerging and developing events in the Asia Pacific. This is a really important step to managing the relationship responsibly. And I'm, hopeful, I think, alongside other analysts in the U.S. that it will lead to some relationships being built that can be called upon in crisis situations.
Let's be fair, the United States-China relationship is starting from a pretty low base. I think both sides might suggest that. There is understandable optimism for things to improve. Realistically, what are the realistic outcomes here?
I'm not sure about military-to-military dialogue. We're starting at a very low point, and it's certainly an aspect of the relationship that has long been, a part of our strategic mistrust between the two sides. But I do think there's an important opportunity ahead in 2 weeks when President Xi Jinping will travel to the United States to take part in the APEC summit, where President Xi and President Biden can get together and talk a little bit about long-term approach to managing U.S.-China relations responsibly. And when the two leaders get together and do that, it does send signals to the policy communities on both sides that it is appropriate and useful to have officials at lower levels work together to come to some of those concrete outcomes so that we can show our respective publics as well that there are benefits to these dialogues and that there are benefits to the two sides continuing to talk about their issues instead of managing them through, restrictions or other types of punitive measures.
Progress or improvement in this relationship doesn't necessarily have to happen. It isn't necessarily the default. I mean, look into your crystal ball. How do you see the future of US-China relations?
I think we're going to continue to have a lot of areas where our interests do not align, and we're going to have to manage those through dialogue because the alternative is frankly unthinkable and unreasonable that we would solve these through armed conflict. So we do have to find a way to come together, and I agree that it will be a very rocky road ahead. That's why this meeting in a couple weeks is so important. There's a very messy year ahead in the United States where we're going to have a presidential election. Not only that, but there will be an election in Taiwan in January. And so there's a lot riding on this meeting in 2 weeks to set the tone of the relationship high enough to withstand some of the political headwinds that are certainly coming our way.
The European Union plans to invest more than $6 billion in the Western Balkans to help them make reforms needed for their integration into the 27-member group. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen made her announcement during a visit to North Macedonia. This move is part of a plan to help candidate countries prepare for faster EU membership. China's Vice President Han Zheng says Beijing and Washington should cooperate to face major challenges. His call for peaceful ties followed a meeting with a delegation of US veteran airmen from the Flying Tigers. The group played a key role in defending China against Japanese forces during the Second World War. Veterans from the delegation say they hope to rekindle that spirit of cooperation. At least 14 people have died and 50 others injured after two passenger trains collided in India's Andhra Pradesh state. Officials say it appears to have been caused by human error. This comes just months after a devastating crash involving 3 trains killed 292 passengers and injured thousands more. Charities in the UK are calling for more help for struggling families with young children amid concern about the rising prices of essential products like baby formula. So-called baby banks, where parents can pick up clothing and food, have reported an increased demand for help. Our correspondent Catherine Drew reports.
And as the winter is approaching and we know people will get huge energy bills, we know the demand on our services will at least triple.
Sami Badani, founder of the wellbeing charity The Space, is checking on stock. The charity was formed in the wake of the Grenfell Tower tragedy, the apartment block fire that killed 72 people in 2017 and left a community traumatised. But it's grown considerably since then, helping thousands of people through community activities, outreach and counselling. Nearly 2 years ago, it launched its first baby bank.
I think we've got a huge national crisis where the most vulnerable people in our community, we're talking about babies from birth to the age of 5, have the worst start in life because of the cost of living crisis.
Between 218 300 from...
This local resident, who did not want to be identified, said the cost of nappies and formula for her newborn and 18-month-old cost around $365 a month, putting the family under huge pressure. For many, the baby bank is a lifeline.
If she hasn't got nappies and milk, or when she's running out of clothes and her clothes start getting short for her, I start panicking because I'll buy her stuff, but then I can't keep doing that and on top of everything else. So when I haven't got it, I start panicking. I love this place because they're so friendly and they help you. They help you.
Charities say the cost of baby formula was rising before global shocks prompted widespread increases. Some groups fear struggling families are feeding their babies less or using incorrect products, which carry both health and developmental risks.
We need to make sure that we're doing as much as possible to sort of insulate those products from the worst of food price inflation. We see there as being a role for government here as well, in terms of making sure that the nutritional safety nets that support those very lowest income households that most need the support, that they are receiving that help.
The British government says it's urgently working to tackle high inflation and says it's provided funds to local councils and directly to families for the purchase of food. Those on the front line bracing for the coming winter say community initiatives must be at the forefront of dealing with complex family needs.
What Grenfell showed us, this government or public sector way of giving service to people without their input doesn't work.
Catherine Drew, CGTN, London.
The headlines again. Israel continues its ground offensive in Gaza, claiming more Hamas fighters have been killed in a night of bombardments. The Kremlin blames external interference after anti-Israel protesters storm an airport in Dagestan shortly after a plane from Tel Aviv landed. And China stresses the need to improve military ties with the United States, but warns it will not compromise on Taiwan. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.